And I think if you phrase it like that, then what you find is that certainly for the Chinese, it has been a successful exercise in that it had some very immediate short-term gain, which it fulfilled, and it allowed what you call it had other kinds of gains packed into the BRI itself. So I think I need to explain that. And the first aspect is that there's a short-term economic gain in the sense that BRI, and the fact it's primarily about infrastructure projects, was targeting those sectors of the Chinese economy where there was overcapacity. And it was had an important role in dealing in overcapacity in those sectors of the economy by providing them an opportunity to export. So that was the immediate short-term kind of dynamic which is operating. For the economy, there was another dimension, and that the whole Chinese economy is in transition. It's in transition from a labor-intensive economy to becoming a technology-driven developing economy, where it will have a focus on green economy, a focus on high tech. And so to move away from where there was a heavy reliance on heavy industry to these new industries, BRI plays a role in allowing these industries to have a transition process where they have an external market where they can actually carry on doing these things, but giving them time to change. So it is kind of a space created for the heavy industry to transition. There are other kinds of dynamics which are operating for the Chinese, and that is, if you look at any map of BRI, the majority of the land routes go through central and western China, and there's a deliberate, what you call, strategy there. There have been a number of programs in the past by the Chinese to develop these regions. There is a huge imbalance between the highly developed East Coast, where in China's industrial might is located, and it's more rural Western. So the idea is that BRI infrastructure projects passing through these regions will help to stimulate these regions by developing the economy there, by increasing trade with the neighborhood, and thereby having a positive impact on that process. And I think that's been kind of partial, because there is also what they call a security kind of dimension, because the peripheral China, Western China has unrest, and this development is part of an assimilation strategy. By having rapid development, you encourage transfer of population of Han Chinese to this area and dilute any kind of ethnic problems that might exist. So I think, you know, there are two or three things which are clearly for the Chinese BRI has had an immediate effect in the short term and the more medium term. I think there is infrastructure and everything nowadays has a dual use, and you can't avoid the question that there is a security dimension, and the Chinese feel that there is a C-shaped encirclement of China by the United States that traps it at choke points in the Malacca State, in the South China Sea, in the Straits of Taiwan, and that by developing these kinds of routes, they're breaking through this encirclement with land routes, allowing them to what you call connect with major markets like the European Union as a counterweight to the United States. And so there is clearly a security dimension to this. And I think it's I mean, in a much more general sense, you can say that it's also a response to the US pivot to East Asia. The Chinese have their own pivot to Asia. They're moving into those areas of Asia where the United States presence has declined. That started off with Central Asia, but it's now also the Middle East, Iran, and Saudi Arabia. And Chinese influence is moving into these very spaces where the United States has what you call declined. And I think there is in those countries where they are completely new actors, say like in Latin America. I mean, the mere fact that the Chinese come along and say, we'll make you part of BRI and etc. in United States backyard, the only condition, of course, is diplomatic, that these states should recognize only China, not Taiwan. And so there is a kind of diplomatic dimension to that as well. More generally speaking, it is about the expansion of the cultural footprint. In the sense that, you see BRI, you see the economics, but you're talking about scholarship, the construction of a middle class, which is much more amenable to China and possibly can speak Chinese. Well, all of this is necessary if these regions have to become more integrated with the Chinese economy, and it does play a role. So I would say that you say, well, is BRI a success? I would simply say that for the Chinese, it has certainly been successful because it's touched on a number of issues which they were concerned with. You want to say, is it a success for anybody else? Well, I think that's a bit more complicated question. It's a buyer beware kind of question, because you take money from anybody, you need to be very cautious about whether you are doing it for the right reasons and will you actually be able to pay it off. Yeah, I think sure there are challenges. I mean, the point is what has happened is that they've been very quick to what you call expand into new territories, build huge infrastructure projects, but there is a question about viability. Are these projects actually viable where they've been built? We do know that the studies that have actually looked at carefully at a lot of the loan strategy which the Chinese employ, these are basically commercial loans roughly at about 4% interest, where the project itself is collateral taken by the banks who are lending the money. And so it's a bit like buying a house on a mortgage. The bank owns the property, and the Chinese seem to be actually behaving in that particular way. There is the question about what you call, well, I mean, are these projects going to flourish? Are these going to be successful projects, or are they just throwing money into the ground? Are they just creating a debt crisis for various countries? And I think this is an agency question. This is an agency question in the sense that, the motivations for politicians to accept this money and run with the Chinese on this program is quite varied. I mean, some politicians have simply taken the money as vanity money, for vanity projects. They just simply want to build something and put their name on it, and have no idea whether this will actually have any use value at all. Others have taken projects and used it for political favors, made it part and parcel of corruption, not actually thought through it well. Some have what you call been more serious about it. And so I think that even the Chinese promise a lot, the nub of the issue is each project has to actually be seen in terms of viability on its own. And I think there, I would say that quite a few of these projects were implemented not for the right reason and will be struggling, which actually leads to a kind of a different question. And I think that the Chinese are already realizing that a lot of BRI projects are not doing well. And even though the language of the BRI is still there, and that BRI is very much part and parcel of the lexicon of the Communist Party, they are already moving away from that. And now they're talking about GDI, Global Development Initiative, and now behaving more like foreign investment commercial adventure to more of a development adventure. And I think this is a realization on their part that a lot of these loans are not going to actually pay off, and that they're going to have real problems in trying to recover the money. And it kind of and it's kind of crystallized when we start talking about countries who have been forced to the IMF, whether directly out of BRI projects or indirectly. And these discussions are getting now bogged down because the IMF as an international body is saying, oh, well, if lenders are going to take a haircut, how is it that the Chinese are not going to take any haircut themselves? And I think, and I'm not going to defend the Chinese position, but I understand what their thinking is, that, that here is an organization where they don't have very much say in, and that is imposing upon them certain kinds of conditionality. So I think what their view is that, either they move down the road in the future and separate their alternative to the IMF and the World Bank, or there is a major restructuring of these institutions to allow them to have a greater say. At the moment, they're resisting all of this simply because they feel this is irreconcilable for them, that they are going to be forced to pay a cost by an institution which they don't have a say in. And I think that there's a kind of stalemate at this moment. And they're just simply what you call kicking the can down the road with individual countries and delaying it because they know that once they actually make concessions in one case, then there's a whole line of countries who say, well, we want the same deal. And so they need to actually have now a much more coherent plan to deal with the kind of bad debt which is going to come up over the horizon. I mean, nobody anticipated the Ukraine war. Nobody anticipated there will be a global oil shock and things like that. So it's not entirely what you call the Chinese problem, but they are now part of it, and they're now trying to figure out how they're going to make the best out of a difficult situation. I think the more I begin to, well, I think I kind of hinted it about, how the BRI is transitioning. And one of the things that I begin to realize is that BRI actually is very closely tied to President Xi. And that the moment President Xi goes, the idea that the BRI might continue is a little bit more difficult. And that's where the idea that GDI and things like that are already there to replace BRI. But I think what I also feel is that BRI is the economic side of maneuvers which are more political and geostrategic. So BRI is all about providing opportunities for Chinese companies. It is about providing opportunities specifically for infrastructure orientation, but more down the road, it is more about providing opportunities for the Chinese people, Chinese businesses, that they should have what you call that there should be greater opportunities elsewhere. And you can see if you look at trading patterns, you already can see that since BRI, the shifts in trading patterns which have taken place. I mean, US used to be straightforward, what you call #1 trading partner with China. It's plateaued. Europe has become more important, even though that might now plateau. Southeast Asia is now the biggest trading partner of China. It's grown enormously in the last decade, and this growth is not only because of the Regional Cooperation Economic Pact, the RCEP, which they had signed. It's also because BRI is finding the kind of foundation for this economic integration. And the other thing you'll see is that they're moving into the Middle East, particularly Iran and Saudi Arabia. And what you see is that Saudi Arabia and the Middle East has now become, after Southeast Asia, the second largest trading partner for China. So you can see that, you know, BRI is playing a role in developing new markets for Chinese to engage with. And I think that in this geostrategic rivalry, competition emerging between China and what you call the United States, BRI is actually creating by its investment ambivalence in those very people who look to the United States for security. They look for United States for security, but at the same time, they know that they can only go so far because they want investment from China, and it creates that ambivalence. The Chinese don't need them to become allies. That ambivalence is very, very important for them. And that ambivalence is part of this more broader geostrategic strategy of BRI creating the economic basis for a multipolar world. I mean, the Chinese talk about a multipolar world, so do the Russians, so do the Indians. But how do you premise the multipolar world? The multipolar world from the Chinese perspective is premised on this economic integration, which the BRI provides, but on politically is expressed by the SOC, by the BRICS, by all this discussion about de-dollarization. And you see that are talking about geopolitical change, which is structured by the power of the Chinese economy, which is drawing these countries into its orbit. And I always contrast this. You see, I mean, when you look at the United States and you talk about its strategy with China, it's all about different security pacts. It's all about different security pacts. It's whether it is the Indo-Pacific, it's AUKUS, it is what you call the Quads, etc., etc. It's all about security. And then they start to think, well, maybe we need to talk about economy, and they talk about Build a Better World program. They talk about the Japan-Africa corridor. Now they talk about the Europe-India corridor, and they're all on paper. The Chinese have moved from the other direction, and BRI and other economic interaction in the Chinese neighborhood, which is most of the world, is about creating connections to China, which undermine this alternative strategy from the United States, which is all security oriented. So you can see that, you know, BRI is even though it's economic in character, it's leveraging into the geopolitics, and it's all part of what you call the Chinese thinking about a different world from the one that which is dominated by the United